Don't recall.
You called me at, let's see, 11:24 p.m.
That sounds about right.
I wonder what I would call him for.
I don't know.
Probably just tell me I look so handsome.
It's true.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to call it.
So today on my Facebook memories is around the time that we were supposed to fly home, and it reminded me of, do you remember how we missed our chalk flight on the Chinook?
Yeah.
Because it was at like midnight, so all these birds landed, and only, what's his name, Captain Cothrell, the PA, only person to get on the birds.
I've forgotten about that.
I remember watching them land and being like, well, that's weird. Wonder what they're doing here. And then they took off and found out like hours later that was supposed to be our ride off Sparwangar.
I just remember First Sergeant Colin walking out. He's like, I wanted everybody to go home together anyways. This works out perfectly.
Oh, I wanted to punch him when he said that.
Oh, man. Well, that speaks to a lot of the inefficiencies that the military can be incredibly guilty of.
Yes.
Yeah, no kidding.
The inefficiencies that will come up repeatedly throughout the process of recording this thing, I'm sure.
Gosh, man, it just that was just extra frustrating though.
Yeah.
Because we were like, all they would have had to say is, "Hey, have your bags packed." We would have been ready in like an hour.
Yeah.
We did not need any prep time to get ready to leave Sparwangar.
Well, I think at that point, most of our stuff was already packed.
Yeah.
Because they had told us we were going home like that day. They didn't tell us it was at midnight.
Yeah. I remember, now you mentioned that, I remember that because I wanted to be able to talk about how my last firefight was only like 24 hours from getting on the bird.
Yeah.
It ended up being more like 48, but still.
Yeah, I don't remember when the birds actually came for us, just being real sad when we missed one.
Yeah.
Actually, if I remember correctly, we missed those birds and we went on that mission because of that. We weren't supposed to go on that mission.
Really?
Some of y'all did. I didn't go like that.
I didn't go.
That final night mission, like that night raid. Yeah, I didn't go on that.
That's the one with the EOD. It was actually a kind of a bad firefight because Klein almost got shot, and then the EOD guy caught one to the helmet.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I think we weren't supposed to go on that. I think it was supposed to be a very small element that was leaving behind, like a couple, like the trail element.
Yeah.
And because we had a whole bunch of people, we took a whole bunch of people. That's why all the people that never got their CIB finally got to go on a mission and get their CIB.
Yeah.
But they weren't supposed to be able to do that. Like, we were supposed to be gone.
Yeah,
if I remember correctly.
It was like people like Dominguez and Tacroni who went on that mission.
Yeah.
Really? Yeah. You mentioned that because I remember me and Kohler were kind of running the show. Duke was out there. I don't know. It's actually a pretty good story in that, but I think I'll have to save it for later when we start talking about ripping in and out with units.
Yeah.
Because it just speaks to how much you can pick up, how much knowledge you kind of accrue over the course of that 9 months, and how when you try to pass it on, sometimes it falls on deaf ears.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had cleared literally with my fingers, swapped a path across this trail, and like was very specific in my instructions not to step outside of it. I go back, guys are just walking down the road. So yeah, good times. So we're sitting here with Glenn Phillips, who was in 2nd Squad of 1st Platoon, and he served under Sergeant Nintz and with those dudes. So he's able to bring a little bit of a different perspective to the table from Curtis and I, because for the first, half of the deployment, our squads, except for on bigger missions, went on separate patrols, right? So, Glenn, give us a quick introduction to yourself and tell us, why'd you join the Army? Why'd you choose the infantry? Give us the short and sweet.
All right. So I joined the Army because I had just failed out of the local community college. My later ex-wife her cousin was in the Army. It was like, oh, that's the coolest thing you'll ever do. So I went to the recruiter and he gave me his used car salesman pitch, and I got offered wheeled vehicle mechanic, infantryman, and predator drone operator. And I decided that I didn't want to be the guy sitting in a air-conditioned room somewhere in Las Vegas, so I joined the infantry. Like, yeah, this is going to be the coolest thing ever. Got sent to Fort Stewart, where I was basically told I was never going anywhere because they were done with deployments to Iraq. Mm-hmm. So we did our training exercises, and eventually we got word that we were going to Afghanistan.
Yeah, you guys were the first batch of privates too, right after the Iraq deployment.
Yeah, so
And
we were on Rear D for, I don't remember when y'all got back, but we were on Rear D. I got there in August, so it was like 2 or 3 months.
yeah, a couple months. We got back in like middle of October.
Yeah.
So I thought yesterday said April, and I was like, man, why didn't they send them on to Iraq? August
No, I
makes
think
more
the only
sense.
person who almost went was King. I think King almost got sent over, but it was just enough time left where they were like, we're not going to bother.
Yeah, right. So that was kind of an interesting thing for me because I was like the second round of privates to come to the unit after the previous deployment to Iraq, which was a pretty gnarly one. They were in Soldier City,
Yeah.
and so it was like a very similar experience for me in that I had a big long train up. I mean, I was in the unit for 8 or 9 months before we deployed and things like that. So it was very similar to what you had a long time. You had what, a year and a half before we deployed.
Yeah, just about. Probably
Yeah,
longer than that, actually.
yeah,
Which at that time was a long period of time for someone to go without deploying. That was kind of the
no,
end of
big
that
time.
era.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because up to that point, like Third ID and 164 had been 12 on, 12 off
Yeah.
for since 2003, since the invasion of Iraq. So that was what 2010.
Yeah.
So that's for I think Bravo Company was on its I think that was the fourth or fifth deployment for the company to Iraq, and then of course then Afghanistan came down the pipeline.
Which that was a wild twist because that 18 months, all you're doing is mechanized training. So you're
Yeah,
doing
Bradley
gunnery
Terry.
tables, you're running dismount patrols out of Bradleys and stuff. And then it was this instant switch.
Yeah, I think we were like halfway through our last gunnery table in the Bradleys, and then it's like, nope, gotta start humping gear again. I was very disappointed because at that point I didn't give a shit about being old badass infantryman. I just wanted to sit in the Bradley turret and
Yep. Nope.
eat Twinkies and play video games.
Might as well go park it.
Yeah. Um. Yeah, we switched gears out of the mechanized stuff, and like, do you remember? I remember the rumor mill kind of ebbing and flowing. Basically, as soon as we got back, it was like, "Oh, we're Afghanistan. We're going to Afghanistan." And I just remember thinking, like, "Okay, yeah, right." But then
Yeah.
there was a serious increase in rumors leading up to whenever we found out. Do you remember that similar
Yeah.
kind of vibe?
Yep. And then I remember nobody knew a date for a long time. Like nobody
Yeah,
even knew a month. It was just like, oh, it's coming. It's coming. And I kind of remember hearing, I think we were actually at NTC when they were like, oh, well, it got pushed to the left. You're leaving sooner. And we're like, okay, but
yeah,
sooner from when? Like nobody actually knows when we're supposed to be leaving. And they're like,
yeah,
oh, yeah, you'll figure it out. We're like, cool. Thanks, man.
yeah. And I think that speaks to how like weird it was in the lead up to that because when we led up to Iraq, like I got there in March of 2009, and we knew we were going to Afghanistan, or sorry, Iraq in October.
Yeah.
October, November. They had that timeline not nailed down. And then for us, it was, I mean, even up to the week we deployed, we still didn't know exactly what day, because I
Yeah.
remember everybody sweating whether we would get St. Patrick's Day off. That was like our last 4-day weekend before
Yeah.
we deployed. So, but we did get it off.
Well, I mean, like the day I wasn't like in hindsight isn't super surprising. We didn't know the day because like the logistics of that are just a complete nightmare. But not even knowing like generally like the week. Because
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
when I showed up 3 weeks earlier, like, well, it could be next week, it could be in 3 weeks. And then like one day they're like, okay, you're going tomorrow. We're like, oh, right, we're going tomorrow. I was like, just kidding. It's been pushed to another day. And then at like 10 p.m. that night, it's like, hey, 1 o'clock work call tomorrow. We are leaving tomorrow. I'm like,
I was almost late to leave. I was with Nagurn in Savannah. I was actually at like Bass Pro Shops or whatever it is. It was out off of 16 in Savannah. I was picking up some last minute stuff. And I was just
Yeah.
like, dude,
Yeah.
we're going to be late. Like, we got to fucking move. And my poor mom drove my car from Savannah all the way back to home in New York.
Uh,
So she hadn't driven a standard in, I don't even know how long. And she was like, oh, I'll just take it back. And just hopped in, cruised out. 17 hours later, she was home.
man, that had
Wow.
to be a long 17 hours for
I
her.
felt so
Yeah,
bad
no
for
kidding.
her.
Yeah. Oh man.
So before the deployment, like you found out that you were going, And then I've heard, several times the story of the come to Jesus moment at NTC.
Yeah.
And it seems like universally, and I wasn't there, but it seems universally for everyone that was there that was kind of like the moment where like, oh shit, this is going to be real. Did that have that same kind of effect for you?
Yeah, so the way I remember it is basically, we were in the box, so everybody had in the box, like your 2 or 3 week, like no phones, you're doing your training exercises, you're going. So we were running probably 19, 20-hour days, we're all exhausted, and all of a sudden our night mission gets canceled, and kind of all the platoon sergeants gather up their dues in like little circles, and they're like, all right, hey, listen, we just got off the phone with the commander of the unit that's where we're going to be. And it was basically a conversation of, it doesn't sound good. Here are the things they're finding. These are the tactics that the Taliban are using in that area. It's going to be a really hard fight.
Yeah.
And then it was kind of, to hear Sarnath talk like that, you're like, all right, this is real. This isn't just him like trying to get us ready for some like gung ho shit. It was legitimate.
Yeah, because he wasn't one to exaggerate.
Right,
No,
exactly.
yeah.
He was the most straightforward person I've ever met. So when he sits you down and says, this is going to be a fight, people are going to get hurt, you listen. And you're like, oh, shit, okay.
I have a very, very detailed memory of his like face and his demeanor and stuff was not him. Like you said, he's just so consistent.
Yeah.
And he's always just flat, like in a great way. And that he's always reliable for that. But you could tell he was like, fuck, I got to tell these guys that people are going to get hurt and people are going to die, you know?
And I mean, to a certain extent, I'm sure he was shaken too. Because he,
yeah.
Like that's not an easy conversation to have, and it's not an easy conversation to have and also realize you're part of that group too.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he hadn't had a combat deployment either.
Yeah.
Not like a combat deployment where he had seen combat.
Yeah. He deployed to Iraq with us. That was his. I think that was actually his first deployment.
I think that was his first because he was in TRADOC for a while.
A long time. And so we inherited him towards the tail end of Iraq, maybe 4 or 5 months left there, and he hadn't, like, well, all of us in Iraq, we didn't see any combat at all in our squad and a platoon or whatever. So yeah. Anyway,
so we're all sitting there, and he kind of has this moment where he takes a breath and he's like, "You're not supposed to have your phones, but given that you just found this out, they pulled out the boxes of phones and they're like, go call your parents, go call your wives, whoever you have at home that cares, just go call them and let them know, tell them what you're comfortable with." So I remember pacing back and forth in the back of a covered LMTV using Nagurn's phone because I didn't have service. Just basically telling my parents, like, hey, just know that this could be a really, really ugly 9 months, and I really need you guys to be prepared for me to not come home.
Yeah.
Which is something that's so hard to tell your parents. My parents have been there my whole life, literally. And you're like, hey, listen, I might die. Sorry.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think I didn't even bother to call home after that because I just didn't know how to go about putting it together. And I knew we'd be going home for Thanksgiving and stuff like that. So, like, they obviously knew we were going to Afghanistan, and up at that point. But I remember like sitting down at Thanksgiving before dinner. I think after dinner, I was telling everybody, I was okay, like, this is what's going on. This is what we can expect. And then I had a couple days later, I sat down with my parents and talked about like what I wanted to have done with my stuff. Like, if I'm killed, I want you to do this with my bank account and my truck. And that was a really kind of hard conversation to have with, like you said, with your parents.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's something you expect.
It's not kind of a backwards thing. Usually it's your parents telling you what's going to happen when they get to a certain age or, a health level. So it's kind of I'm sure it was a mindfuck for them too, to be like, why is my son giving me, last instructions? Like, this should be the other way around.
Yeah, for sure.
And I mean, to this day, I haven't really told my parents, like, I haven't given them a lot of detail on what we actually went through.
Yeah, same.
Just because, I'm lucky enough to have made it home in one piece with no physical injuries. I don't think they need the gory details of what we went through.
Yeah.
Yet here you are.
Yeah.
Well, I'm probably not going to tell them to watch this.
Fair enough.
I know. Yeah. Same here, man. Like, I've not said hardly anything to either one of my parents or anybody, really. I mean, really, the only people I've ever talked to in detail is, like, the guys, talked to my wife, but, I haven't really spoken with them about any of this stuff. So it's kind of funny. All this stuff's going to come out through this podcast.
for sure.
Hmm.
It's like that. I don't know, that whole NTC come to Jesus, and then the phones. This kind of there's kind of set this build up, set these expectations for what Afghanistan was going to be like.
Oh, for sure.
We talked before about how we all thought it was going to be mountains, or we thought it was going to be like the movie Restrepo, which had just come out.
Yeah.
So how did, now that these expectations had been set, how did it measure up?
So I remember being on the Chinook, but I was far enough in that I couldn't really see the landscape, as we're flying from CAF. So my first impact is CAF, of course, where pretty sure we all went to like TGI Fridays at first. I'm like, oh, Afghanistan's not so bad. This is cool. Like, whatever.
Hell yeah, salsa night.
It was, everybody had those like, the spring break Kandahar airfield shirts.
Yeah.
I remember
those. Yeah.
And you're just like walking the boardwalk and you're like, all right, this isn't so bad. Like, there's a hockey rink over there. And then you get to the runway and we fly out, and I couldn't see anything. We land at Spurwingard. I'm like, okay, this is pretty legit from what I was expecting. I was basically expecting we were going to be unloading and setting up GP mediums with fans running, so we got a cross breeze.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I guess first impression of the actual cop was like, this is pretty good. We could be living a lot worse.
It's funny. Everybody has said that. I think everybody we've asked has said that exact same thing. Like, well, it's gonna be COTS and GP mediums for 9 months. So it was a relief to get off and see like hard structures and stuff.
I definitely think we got spoiled as far as living conditions went.
Big time. Yeah. Even Zangabad had harsher conditions than we did, really.
Yeah.
In some ways.
Mazamgar had harsher conditions
yeah.
than we did, and that was the brigade fob.
Yeah. Right.
That place was terrible.
Man. Yeah.
And I'm trying to think of the first time that I actually because we had the sniper OP, but I hadn't really gone up there. Like, we first got there, and I remember Baker and Rosie went up there and we're looking around. I was like, oh shit, can we go up there? Like, I've been in the Army for 2 years at this point, but like, I've never been on a deployment. I've never been there before. I have no idea what the hell I can do. Mm-hmm. So I'm just like minding my own business. And I remember we did platoon level PT and ran up the hill.
So stupid.
I'm looking out over it. I'm like, all right, where's all the mountains? And then you run back down and you can see to the south, you can see the Reggae. And you're like, okay, there's some, but like, I thought this was going to be all mountains.
Yeah, same here, man. I remember doing that PT run and thinking, this is fucking stupid. And I remember expecting to get shot. Like, like we're here. It's the perfect thing. It was a defilade. Like a PKM could just whack right up the formation,
Yeah. Mm-hmm. 30-something dudes running up a hill in the wide open.
Yeah.
Imagine explaining that to your commander. How did you lose 30 dudes on day 3? Well, we decided to do some platoon PT, Sarge.
Well, we went for a run.
Yeah. Yeah, that was dumb. So that was your first impressions of the landscape. Like I said, it was flat. We were all expecting mountains and stuff. So
trying to understand how different it was from what I was expecting, and then to go out on that first RIP patrol. Mm-hmm. And I mean, those guys were walking on the roads. They were like, be careful walking on the roads, as they're just trucking right down the roads. I'm like, you guys are fucking crazy. And we went to I'm trying to remember. I think it was an A&P checkpoint. It used to be right at the north end. It almost looked like an old prison that they had turned into. It was like a hardened concrete structure. I don't think we ever went there more than a handful of times.
Khyber, right? Right at the north end of Hyena.
Yeah, mm-hmm. So we stopped there, and then I think we walked back. I think we went through the bazaar. I'm trying to remember. We either went through the bazaar or we went out east a little bit, but not like
just south of Khyber. There was like a mini bazaar. So if you went south of Route Hyena, like whatever that village was, it was right across the street from Khyber.
Yeah,
there was a bazaar there because we went there a few times.
Yeah. So
there's some pictures. I'll throw them up. It's like some camels with like a whole bunch of like grass on them or whatever, and that was that village just south of Khyber.
Yeah. So we tinkered around there, and then we went back, and I was like, all right, we heard that this place is terrible, but that didn't really seem that bad.
Yeah. So one of the things about those first few weeks is like our squad actually ended up getting into 2 or 3 firefights before you guys ever, because you guys were never on those patrols with us. And I remember
we were so mad too. Everybody was so salty that we'd be like, everybody would walk up to Nintz and be like, yo, can we just go out with third? Like one time they always get shot at. Like we just want to get our CIBs. And it's like, nah, man, your time will come. Just like chill out.
Yeah. Right. Well, I remember coming back from the first one, talking to Brown. He was like, man, what was it like? And I was like, well, we got shot at and we shot back at them. And, and then the
So
second,
descriptive.
yeah, right. Well, they had a whole episode dedicated to it, so I figured I wouldn't regurgitate.
I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
But the second firefight came down. That's the one where Perez got pinned down that hill. And,
Yeah.
I remember walking, and that's when we got smoked so bad walking back to the trucks because we were like covering open ground. And I remember getting back from that one, and I think it was Brown again. But man, I can't believe you guys got another firefight. And at that point, I was like, yeah, it kind of sucks actually.
Well, to make it even worse, you guys were driving the trucks that we walked back to. So you had to hear us getting into a firefight, sitting in your truck being like, these motherfuckers.
Yeah. Well, that's what we did for at least a couple of them is, we would just drop you off. We started calling ourselves the Second Squad Taxi Service, like subtly. It wasn't like something we advertised. People would be like, oh, Second Squad Taxi Service going out.
Yeah.
And we would just shuttle you guys and you would get in a firefight and we would just sit there all pissed off.
Oh, man. We talked to Nance about y'all's first firefight, and it seemed fairly mild. I mean,
it was exhilarating because it's like time number one, but there was just a gray putt to the south of where we were walking, and we just were walking along a wall, so nobody was really in any imminent danger.
Right.
Yeah.
And they took a couple pop shots at us, and of course, everybody just unloaded on an entire gray putt.
Yeah. Yeah, that was one thing that we always did a good job of was overwhelming firepower,
sure.
because we didn't have to be sparse with our ammo. We could just blow through it. Yeah.
Fast forward to 2017, and infantrymen had to inventory their bullets before and after every mission.
That would be terrible.
Really?
Dude, yeah, I walked in, like, when I was a pilot, we landed inside some fob to do some thing. Why Apaches were landing, I don't know. It's not our thing.
Mm-hmm.
But there were a bunch of infantry guys around, so obviously we're going to show them the aircraft and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, yeah, when we go out to do these KLEs, we have to, like, count our rounds. We had to sign a hand receipt for every one of our rounds. When we come back, we have to count them again. Like, they're not allowed to touch their weapons when they go on the KLEs. It's like, dude,
that's
awful.
That sounds like an asshole sergeant major to me.
Yeah.
That sounds like Global War on Terror in its 20th year.
Yeah.
It's basically becoming a garrison war at this point.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah.
So, I mean, all these cupcake patrols, everyone's getting into little firefights, but it's really not getting very serious.
Yeah.
Like, even the firefights, we're coming back. We're like, oh, that was so much fun. Like,
Yeah.
we're not taking it serious yet. When did it get serious for you? When did you know, it's like, okay, this isn't fun anymore. Like, now I have, like, serious concerns about getting back.
Yeah. Well, so the way Second Squad did it is we split up into like 3 smaller fire teams. So the first team was Brown, Smothers, and Hewlett, who did the clearing for the first 3 months. And then it was me, Wilkins, Nagurn, and Mayo was in charge of us. And then there was like Duke, Kobos, Akoa, I don't remember, and Ebro was like the assault element. So I would say it probably got real for me when I switched to being the clearing guy.
Yeah.
And it was kind of this like, all right, now I'm in front, now I'm the guy who everybody has to rely on. And there were a couple missions that were like, all right, this is pretty scary. I don't really like this. Minotaur Down was really kind of when it hit home for me, because we came around the corner. So it was the Minotaur and Nagurn, and then, the Minotaur, then me, then Nagurn driving the Minotaur. And I remember we came around one of the bends in Sketcha, and just immediately the Minotaur got lit up. I mean, they were shooting everywhere at this thing, around it. So I'm just sitting behind this Minotaur listening to stuff like ding, 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 ding. I'm like, cool, man. This is not fun at all.
Yeah.
And so we keep walking, and then there's the typical like rocks in a row on the road. Like, all right, man, no problem. We got the Minotaur. We're golden. And I watched the Minotaur drive forward and off the edge into the river. And I just look at Nagurn, and I was like, dude.
What was the look on his face after he drove a $500,000 piece of equipment into a stream?
Don't think I've ever seen a face that described like embarrassment and shame. You just look back, and he's like, And everybody else is looking at him the same way. Like, dude, are you serious?
What did you do?
Which, I mean, granted, like, he has this huge, it was like the first remote control that had ever been built that they were like, here's this piece of really expensive military equipment. Use it with an original Nintendo controller. Good luck.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
Can't hold it against him.
yeah, I can't say I blame him for it.
Yeah.
And so then, of course, it's Mayo and I just in the prone while everybody figures out what the hell to do. And a couple of the times the conversation came up, well, we know there's an IED there. Let's just turn on the GPR and go through it.
How
And I
about
was like,
no?
I don't want to do that. I'm the guy who's going to have to go through it.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, Nints and stuff that, like, that got poo-pooed pretty quickly, and that was not an option.
Mm-hmm.
So then it was, we pushed back, and I think when we started to move back is when the guy popped around the corner and took a couple pop shots at us, and the ricochet that hit Boyce.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that dude got lit up. I mean, every single person that could shoot shot down that alleyway.
Yeah, right.
And then eventually the decision was made to move into that compound that was just behind us. And I remember walking up to, like, clearing up to the front door of that compound, past guys that had already, you know, they're laying there, so I know it's clear. But I felt like my heart was going to explode out of my chest. And I froze in that doorway. I remember I couldn't even walk in there to, like, look around. And so the A&A ended up walking in first. But I sat down underneath that little, like, straw awning for probably 20 minutes just thinking, like, my heart was about to explode out of my chest.
Yeah. Did you ever feel like you were properly trained and prepared to do that job? To clear?
No. I you know, honestly, though, I don't know how you can properly train someone for stuff like that. Like, we did the little lane at CAF where you, like, go through.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, it's an ever-evolving battle that we're in. So it's not always consistently going to be, okay, you know, pull out, like, what did we use in the beginning? The Valen?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or was it the Valen?
It was the Valen, the Chia,
Mm-hmm.
and the Minehound.
Yeah. The Chia was the carbon rod detector.
Yeah, and we switched to that one after Pinnock and Lily, and that was like that was the big switch for that.
Yeah, and then immediately switched right to the Minehound because they're like, Chia can't catch everything. We're like,
yep.
I know, like it felt like the whole, like, assignment of people as clearing guys was like an afterthought. They didn't consider that they needed to train these people specifically to do this job.
Sure.
And I think future units did do that. They sent them to, like, courses while they were stateside. I think actually 138 did that. But we never got, like, pre-deployment training on it. It was all, like, OJT.
Yeah.
And it's really like an MOS. You know, it's like EOD light or like the combat engineers, really.
Yeah, for sure. That's, I mean,
and to have, like, just a bunch of PFCs like, hey man, like, here's a $35,000 piece of equipment with state-of-the-art ground penetrating radar that has to be dialed in specifically to work.
Yeah.
Go walk. Oh, and by the way, your squad leader is going to be yelling at you to walk faster.
Yeah. I think that was that's something that you just kind of learn. Oh, we're talking about my last firefight, but our last firefight as a platoon, like, intact, was a pretty good demonstration of how long it takes you to really learn, like, where the IEDs are placed, because you figure it out, you figure out how to maneuver in the space, and then when you get to those little hot spots, you know, those road crossings or those whatever, you really do slow down and you take your time and you sweep and you look and things like that. But then when you're walking down a grape road, like, you're not sweeping for anything, you know, you're just hauling ass to try and get to the, you know, to the next little hump to climb or whatever.
Yeah, well, to a certain extent too. I mean, the Grape Row was pretty much a guarantee IED free.
Yeah, exactly. So you figured out where they were, where they weren't, where they probably wouldn't be, you know, but it just took us till basically throat chop, really, to figure out how to move in that space without so much concern and worry about stepping on IEDs, you know.
Yeah, because I mean, even at the beginning when we're walking roads, you're understandably terrified. So you're sweeping every inch of the road in front of you. Probably wasn't necessary until you got to those choke points and those natural lines of travel that we talked about in previous episodes, but we didn't know that at the time. We got, like, that IED lane at CAF. We're looking for landmines at first.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, our
You're looking
mind
for like
wasn't-
PNM mines.
Yeah, our mind wasn't in the right place, and that's not our fault. But yeah, I never felt like we were properly prepared to do that job.
No, that was,
No.
I mean, and even the lane was only 10 or 15 minutes long.
Yeah, it was a joke, really.
Yeah,
Just like
better
most-
than nothing.
Better than nothing.
True.
but-
Yeah.
I mean, they pretty much taught us how to turn it on. I seem to remember, like, they really harped on tripwires at that lane for at
Yeah.
least part of it.
Mhm.
Not a thing. Not a
Yeah.
thing
The,
that we
the
dealt
lane
with.
that the EOD guys, our EOD guys, set up for us at Sparwangar was way better.
Yeah,
It
oh,
was
for sure.
significantly better. Yeah, I actually remember the lane at CAF, and it was my turn to like go down it, and I think I stepped on the ID. I was like, oh fuck, like I'm gonna die. So
I
man.
backed up off of one lane onto the other one to like get out of the way, and I stepped on the IED in that lane, and the guy's like, "Oh, you're dead," and I was like, "Oh, that's funny."
Yeah. Yeah, probably some fucking pogue out there doing the lanes anyways. I don't even think those guys were EOD.
No, I don't even think they were Army. Weren't
Yeah, I
they
think they were
civilians?
contractors.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, they were. They were freaking contractors. What a joke, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a whole episode to be done about the racket that these companies have got on
Oh my
sending
God.
people to Afghanistan for pointless jobs. Yeah. But that's a different topic completely.
By the way, if you happen to be one of those companies looking for people to do pointless jobs, I'm free. The starting salary is $200,000 a year, but I'll only work 6 months out of the year. So,
Yeah, right.
panjwipodcast@gmail.com.
Oof, joke's on you. I would do $100,000. Remember the guys who washed our laundry?
Yeah, little Filipino
I'd do that for
guys.
$100,000.
Shit.
No.
I tell you, they had like KBR and companies like that, which we won't get too political, but KBR had the racket, man. It was like they're going in there paying, the American government's paying for these contracts. And then like in Iraq, for example, all the people that they employed were from like the Philippines and India. And, so they were probably getting, dollars on the day. And then KBR is just sitting back, fat cats lighting cigars with $100 bills, laughing all the way to the bank,
When it got real bad was right before I went to Afghanistan. So end of Obama, right before Trump.
Mm-hmm.
They had like that arbitrary troop cap.
Mhm.
So like
Mhm.
aviation units, what they would do is they wouldn't bring their own mechanics. They would only bring like the crew, like the line crew chiefs for the companies, but all the people that did like the resets and the heavy maintenance, they wouldn't bring them. They would hire contractors to do all that work. So we would bring half of our formation because we couldn't bring all of them, and they would pay a whole bunch of schmucks $100,000 a year to work on the helicopters instead, while we got privates that make $25,000 a year sitting at home because there's a troop cap.
Yeah, right. I feel like we ran into a similar thing in Iraq, because when I was in Iraq is when we like withdrew and all
Yeah.
combat forces left.
Mhm.
And I remember I was home on leave, and everybody's like, "Do you have to go back?" And I was like, "Yeah, I have to go back." When all this stuff came out in the news, and they showed the trucks crossing the Kuwaiti border, and when I got back, we were no longer 2nd Brigade Combat Team. We were 2nd Brigade Advise and Assist Team, and then that was around the time. Yeah, exactly. And so the contractors were laughing all the way to the bank as well, the American ones anyways.
Yeah,
So,
it's all racket.
yeah. I think that's actually, we should take a little bit of time to explain to civilian audiences how
Sure.
whenever you're deployed, essentially you have these massive bases like CAF, and Iraq was full of them. Afghanistan really only got Kabul and CAF,
Yeah.
and maybe Jalalabad.
Yeah, J-Pad was sizable. Any place that had an air base. So
Yeah.
any place that aircraft were stationed, you had a pretty decent footprint.
Yeah, and I remember flying into, that was actually an epiphany for me. I was flying into Fob Stryker, which I think is just north of Baghdad, and it was one of the big, huge ones. And I was looking out the little porthole of the Chinook and thinking, there's nothing but tan buildings all the way to the horizon. I mean, it was like a city,
Mhm.
And I remember thinking, okay, this is fucking stupid. Like, we don't need to be spending this kind of money so people can have Pizza Hut and Taco Bell. Like, this is why it's costing us $1 trillion a year, to fight this war. So
Yeah, but would you want to fight that war without Pizza Hut and Taco Bell?
we did.
Yeah,
That's
we
the thing
did.
that sucks about it.
And they fucking rocketed the Pizza Hut. We got to
Oh,
go
yeah.
back, and they were like, "Nah, Pizza Hut's closed." A rocket hit it, and you're like, "God damn it!"
Yeah.
So he had one thing, took it away.
We did have TGI Fridays. I hit that thing up.
Yeah,
Yeah, for like $40 a plate.
Yeah.
yeah,
They were like, oh, you can get a milkshake, and it was like those Gatorade sport shakes.
yeah. Those are gross. Yeah,
Remember,
but
Boyce was so excited to get his damn milkshake.
With
yeah,
his fentanyl lollipop in his mouth. I'm getting a
yeah.
milkshake.
Nuh-uh. Not till you get to America, buddy.
Oh man.
Poor
I
bastard.
wonder how long it was before he actually had a real milkshake.
Germany.
You think they gave him one in the hospital? I don't think they
I
did.
bet he could have found one out. We'll have to ask him.
Yeah, we'll have to ask him. He's on here soon, but
But
I've always
anyways,
wondered that.
for those who don't know, yeah, these massive fobs, forward operating base is kind of not really an apt description. It's more like like Curtis saying, more like an air base. Like it's a fully functioning city of thousands and thousands of people, and then you go out and you go into fobs or cops that get smaller depending on the unit. So we were on a company cop, and so generally at the fob, like life is not that hard. I mean, you're working. I mean, everybody in the military works, no matter what your job is, especially when deployed. But it's just a different world. I mean, it's essentially a mini America, and a lot of people probably go their entire deployment and never even see an Afghan face. So,
Well, I mean, when I was back in 2017, I was on bases like that. I lived on CAF for several months. I lived on JBAD for several months. It's like going to your office job, depending on what your job is, of course. But for me, it was like going to my office job. I woke up, I went to work, I did my work, which was flying the deadliest attack helicopter in the world. And then I went and I went to the PX and I got whatever I needed, and then I went to bed.
well, I remember we lived on two fobs in the middle 6 months of the Iraq deployment. So the first 3 months we were on a checkpoint. It wasn't that great. Last 3 months were freaking miserable. It was worse than Afghanistan living conditions by a long shot, and like no sleep, pulling guard, all that stuff. But those middle 3 months on those big fobs, we were at QS and then we moved to Missoula. But QS, man, they had like a bus service, So you could take the bus to the DFAC and you'd have stir fry and Mexican food and like all these crazy. It was not bad in terms of like the living conditions, but also it didn't need to be there because these people could have gone their 12 months just sleeping on cots and eating MREs and.
Well, and that's the thing is the Army's designed not to have that infrastructure. Like
Yeah.
we built it into ourselves. We have cooks, we have laundry
Mhm.
services, we have people that do all these jobs, but there are not very many of them. So we don't have enough cooks to have cooks in a DFAC forward deployed constantly for 20 years.
Yeah, and that's what I've always had a pretty radical idea, and maybe I should sell it to the coin thinkers somewhere, the Army College or whatever. But I thought when you put a platoon out on a cop or on a OP or something, like they should be like raising a garden and having goats and stuff like that to feed themselves. Like you could assign the shit bags to goat duty, and they could be the ones slaughtering the goat that day and putting it on the barbecue, And that way you don't have to spend all that money, take all those resources and all that time and everything to get these external things into that place in order for it to support itself, when it could just do it right there on the spot.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure the food that you give the goats would be higher quality than the MREs you give soldiers.
Yeah.
So I think they're probably still
For
saving money.
sure.
Yeah, oh, that's true. But the MREs are $12 a piece. Now that was 10 years ago. Let's tell them what they are now.
Well, I mean, $12 a piece to who?
Right.
With $2 to
someone.
make,
Yeah, $12 a
$15
piece.
at the PX. Free to me.
How many gallons of fuel does it take to fly them to Afghanistan and put them on a truck and drive them out to Cop Spare One Gar? Yeah. So, anyways,
But yeah, I mean, that's a good point. There's a huge backbone to the military presence in both of those countries. Anytime you're in a war for an extended period of time, I'm sure Vietnam vets have their own stories about the big fobs and the crap that was going on there too. It probably was to a lesser degree, but the same thing.
yeah, I mean, my brother-in-law, his dad was a Vietnam veteran, and he talked about that. He talked that there's kind of a serious separation of the big, huge bases where people are just kind of chilling, and drinking beer, and playing volleyball and shit. We never got to drink beer, unfortunately.
No, but we did experience that difference. We roll
Mhm.
into CAF dirty with dirty uniforms with our combat trucks, and people you had MPs trying to pull people over for not having their lights on or not wearing a seatbelt or, not being allowed into the DFAC because your uniform was dirty or stuff like that. That's why they have that divide between, fobbits and grunts.
Yeah.
That's how that starts, because you have people out there that are working really hard. It's not that we don't have time to shower. It's that there may not be showers.
Right.
Or we don't have time to shower, or we only have so many sets of clothes and we're spending every day getting dirty. There's no way our uniform's ever going to look clean, even if we just washed it yesterday.
Yeah.
So to have a pogue sergeant major standing at the entrance to the DFAC telling you can't eat this good food because you've been off the fob on a cop for 6 months, that creates that antagonism between the two.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like the after effect of that is a kind of a disjointedness in people's idea of what they're doing there, And so, like, the guys out in the front line getting shot at I never felt like I had the Army's support. I mean, obviously we did in terms of, like, air power and, we had plenty of ammo and stuff like that. But, I never felt that anybody back at CAF was giving a shit because they were just living the high life and trying to do the same thing we were doing. They were just waiting to go back home, especially at that point in the war. Everybody was tired of deploying all the time.
Yeah, I thought that too for a while, but what really changed it was when General Abrams showed up, and he took care of us. I mean, we were his like pride and joy.
Yeah, we were the only unit in 3rd ID actually getting in the shit. So we were his golden boys,
Yeah, I mean, props to him. He came out and talked to all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Couple times,
yeah. I remember he came out and he asked us, like, what we needed, and we had gone to this stretch where all we had was, like,
the
blueberry
milk.
muffins and like beef stroganoff every night, and we were like, we gotta do something about the food. And then, like, the next day there was a Chinook with a couple pallets full of, like, at least different options for food and the milk and stuff like that.
I think
he stole the milk from Zangabad.
Yeah, I was gonna say the rumor was he went to Zangabad and stole it all.
Really? Oh man, that's what's up.
And to our listeners, at the time he was Major General Abrams, and he was the commander of 3rd ID as a whole, of the division. And about halfway through our deployment, he became the commander of RC South, which is where we were assigned. So he was the 2-star general assigned of our whole AO, and at the time we were the only 3rd ID unit that was regularly in combat. It's this little tiny company that was attached to a completely different unit out there just getting in gunfights left and right. So I'm sure he was like, I got to go see these guys. I got to see what's up.
Yeah, because the rest of the battalion was at CAF.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, Fob Liberty.
Oh, yeah. It's CAF's neighbor.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, like, pissing and moaning and grunting and groaning to do about that. But I think to wrap this conversation up, and then I'll get off my soapbox a little bit until it comes up again. But if you're one of these people that was on the fob, eating Pizza Hut, and taking the golf cart to the NWR to shoot pool and play video games,
good for you.
Just own it, man. Like, don't go around talking about how you were pretty much infantry or how you, like, went on one patrol with some combat engineers one time or whatever. Like, just own it. Like, yeah, I was there, and, it was pretty sweet. We had pizza and pool. And nobody's going to hate on you for that because you were just doing your job.
Yep.
Don't try to pretend you're doing something. And same thing for you infantry guys. Don't go around slinging your war stories over the place, knowing full and well you're either exaggerating or lying through your teeth. So for those of you who weren't in the military or for civilians, the big flag is we. Anytime the word we comes into the story, be a little suspicious, because we could be a fire team or we could be a battalion. So when we took contact every day and we had so many, casualties or whatever, you don't know what that we is. So anytime you need to hear the I's, when somebody says, I almost got shot, that kind of thing, that separates it.
Yeah. Be proud of your service. You don't have to, you don't have to exaggerate your service. Be proud of it. If you never saw contact, you joined the military in a time of war, and at any moment that could have changed. You could have seen contact. Mm-hmm. There's no reason to be ashamed of anything that you did in the Army or the military in general. Just don't lie about it.
Yeah,
man, just own it. And that's the thing I tell people all the time. People that are interested in, like when I had classmates in school that may be interested in joining, and I said it doesn't matter what you do, like you're gonna work. You know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, my father-in-law was 20-year Navy man. He spent 10 years at sea, so half of his career was at sea, and that dude worked like a freaking dog. Those 20 years. And so, nothing but respect for the people who are putting in the time. Now, if you're like a legal assistant or something, then
If you're a legal assistant, I appreciate your hard work for helping me buy my house from Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Thank you to that lonely hero out there in Kandahar. So that about covers our opinion on our fellow soldiers and fobbits. Again, I say if you served, thank you for your service. Like, be proud of your service. But Glenn, what did you think about the Afghan military?
I remember after we took over as clearing team, they wanted us to teach the ANA how to clear, because the idea was you had an Afghan person clearing and then an American clearing and then kind of so on and so forth.
Right.
I taught the same guy on 4 or 5 different occasions the same clearing stuff, and he would walk up to you and be like, "Oh, I don't know how to use this." It's like, "Bro, I saw you here last week and you were fine. Like, what do you mean?" And it was just, I was unimpressed with it. And then I remember we did that night raid where they tried to steal a pair of nods from us.
Yeah.
And they had tucked them behind the Humvee seat.
I don't know how I got
I
there.
forgot.
Yeah,
Oh, no.
I turned it on. No, we haven't seen them. Oh, do you mean these nods right here? Like, these are ours. Yeah. Okay. Oh, crap. A couple of them were real good dudes. Always got love for Afghan Santa Claus. He was my dude.
Yeah, man.
But
that dude.
I mean, overall, not an impressive fighting force. That
Yeah. I mean, they stayed stoned all the time, man.
yeah.
Like, I remember one guy had like a packet of cigarettes, and he flipped open the top. He's like pushing them out to offer one to me, and half of the stuff in there was just big old fat doobies he had rolled, and the other half was cigarettes. And he's like, "You want the doobie?" I was like, "I'm good. I can't. Sorry."
Nah, I'm all right. Thanks, so.
Do I want it or do I want it?
Yeah, right, exactly. Oh man, but yeah, it was. They were always blowed out of their mind on some kind of drug.
Yeah. Well, it was
I mean, and the police were way worse about
the police
that.
were
For sure.
a lot worse than the army guys were.
we helped the police do that shakedown on people in their poppy fields.
Yeah,
That was early on. I remember that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm glad we quickly abandoned poppy eradication as one of our mission sets, and I can't wait to get Brian Kitching, because I know he hated the poppy eradication mission, and I have a feeling he just told some general to fuck off, and that we weren't going to do that mission anymore because it was stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a waste of time.
Because we just, like, one day we just stopped caring. We just stopped going, because we were burning poppy fields left and right for like 2 weeks, and then suddenly we're like, fuck it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, we're done here.
Yeah, it was that was a futile thing.
Yeah, it's weird you mentioned the clearing, because those of us that cleared, most of our interaction with the ANA was up front with their clearing elements, and it's just kind of the same perspective that you had. It just didn't seem like they wanted to do it.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't that they didn't have the equipment and they didn't have the know-how. In fact, I would argue they knew how to look for the IDs better than we did, because they never left. They knew exactly where those things were.
Yeah.
For the most part. But it just seemed, I think maybe it was because they were from a different part of the country and they didn't really care.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I know there was a significant portion of the deployment where they would not go up front. We still had to clear up front, even though they were supposed to be up there. It was like pulling teeth to get them to lead the mission, which at the time when they were supposed to do.
Right.
We were just supposed to be there to help.
And we finally got to the point where we established that relationship, and then Ramadan started, and they were like, "We don't want to go out. We can't eat." And we would take them out on all-day patrols. Like, "We can't eat. What do you..." And we're like, sorry. Like, here we are.
Oh, yeah.
Gotta come. Yeah.
That was the origin of the "we'll be back by 10 o'clock" lie. Yeah, we'll be back by 10. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
Before it gets hot in the day. And
Never happened.
11:30, you're looking at your watch being like...
We had 5 clicks to go, and then another 7 back.
Yeah, man, for sure. Well, I think another thing about the Afghan guys, and like you're saying, maybe they had a better idea where the IDs were, or something like that. But they've been fighting for years and years and years. And also there's also a direct correlation. I'm convinced. This is just purely hypothetical. There's a direct correlation between the value that you place on human life and the quality of that life that you live. So if you're some dirt farmer in Afghanistan, like your your self preservation and your kind of like willingness to take those extra precautions isn't as ingrained as it is for us because we can sit around the AC, binge watch Netflix, which is pretty easy going, you know?
Yeah.
And so, but for them, like living that hard, harsh life, that, you know, I don't think they would have even cleared if it wasn't for us essentially like trying to force it on them, you know?
Right.
Maybe I'm just pulling that out of my ass, but that was my impression.
I think the unit we had with us was a big factor.
Yeah.
Because when I talked to other people, especially the guys that worked with ODA out by Balambi and stuff, they had like Afghans that cleared for them that were awesome. They were just like super squared away, knew what they were doing, super passionate, and we saw some of that with like ANCOP and like the Afghan commandos when I saw them I worked with them in 2017. It was a completely different animal. I think it has a lot to do with that particular unit at that time.
Yeah. I know, and a lot of guys that, you know, like I've heard nothing but good things about the Afghan commandos. But the only people who ever worked with those guys was SF and, you know, stuff like
Right.
that. So we never got to work with them, you know.
I got to work with them a bunch in 17. And the first time there's a section of the Afghan army called the KPF, the Coast Provincial Force, which is they're all from Coast and they're all trained in whatever by American forces and they live on an American base. And they are really good. And the first time I saw them hit a building, I thought they were Rangers. Because they're hitting the compound with ladders, hopping up. Like one dude's like soloing on the roof with an MK-48, just like holding the whole place hostage while they breached the door. Like it was impressive. And they moved like Americans and they were kitted out like Americans and they trained all the time. And it was such a complete 180 from what I had experienced at Spurwangar, where it was like we couldn't even get them to go down to the range to do a FAM fire.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
But I don't know if that's just different units or it was because it was a big difference in time, too. I mean, it's 5 years of us continuing to try to train those guys.
And also, like, guys who weren't committed at that point were not going to be hanging around anymore. You know, they're 15 years and 16 years into a war. You know, if they thought it was a good idea to make a paycheck, then they get fucked up and like, you know what, maybe not, I'll bow out. But the ones who really care are hanging around and sticking with it, you know. Maybe that's an element too. I don't know. It'd be interesting to find somebody that knows a lot more about that we could talk to.
Yeah, I can't wait to get Lieutenant Persons on, because his career has taken him to the SFAB, which is his whole job is training, advising, and working with the Afghans. So I think he'll have some really good insights on that stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, the Afghans were reluctant to clear. We got stuck with it a lot. And so let's circle back to that conversation about clearing. Like you were talking, Phil, that Minotaur down, you know, getting to that doorway, thinking your heart's just going to pump out of your chest. And one of the things we talked a lot about leading up to this interview was just that fear, you know, that like underlying fear that was always there. You know, I mean, talk about how that affected you, man. Like how did you cope with it? How'd you deal with it?
You know, it's weird because you almost get into, like, after doing it for a while, you get, like, not used to the fear, but you get into this dichotomy where you wake up and you're like, all right, well, if this is the day I die, this is the day I die. Right. Or if this is the day I'm going to lose a limb, it's going to happen today, whatever. You know, I still have to go out and do it. But then you're also dealing with that, you know, like, in the moment. So I could say that all day. You know, I could walk out and be like, okay, well, if it happens, it happens, whatever. But as soon as you saw that line of rocks in the road, you're like, oh, shit, here we go again. Like, There's that fear. And eventually you just have to find something, like, that you anchor to that kind of gets you to take that next step. And then the step after that. And the step after that. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, mine was pretty much always just Mayo, who, even after I would tell him, I'd be like, Mayo, dude, like, just in case, back up. He'd be like, nah, man, like, if I'm going... or if you're going, I'm going with you. So it was really that feeling that if something was going to happen to me, like, he was right there with me. Mm-hmm. Like, and no matter what, I was not taking that step alone.
I think that was probably the most important role in the entire formation. the
Yeah.
guy right behind the clearing guy.
For sure.
And not that the clearing guy wasn't probably equally, if maybe more important, but to have that person behind you with their M4 up, that's scanning, that trusts you so implicitly that they're like, I'm not going to give you the required 6 feet because I care about you. I don't want you to pop around a corner and get smoked.
Right,
Like,
exactly.
And I can't tell you how many times I heard Tom tell me, if you go, I go.
Yep.
Mhm.
And I know Holt told Clark the same thing all the time. If you go, I go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which was against everything that we were trained to do. But those NCOs, those phenomenal leaders, made the decision that if my guy is going to get hurt, I'm going to be there with him because I couldn't live with myself if he stepped around the corner and I wasn't there to protect him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it says a lot about the quality of the team leaders that we had, that they were willing to take that step. You know, like
Yeah.
we got pretty lucky with E5s too.
Yeah, we had phenomenal team leaders on that deployment.
Yeah. Yeah, we got lucky there for sure. I think managing, having, like I said, that's something to anchor to. That sticks out to me because another thing about this conversation about fears, there's different kinds of fear that you experience, and you experience them all in 24 hours, There's the fear that you have, like laying in the bunk the night before a patrol in the bad country, and that sleepless, like, oh shit, like, is tomorrow it? Do I die tomorrow? And then there's like the immediate visceral fear of, a close call, or an IED strike or something like that. But then there's that fear, like you talked about, pushing into these places where it is accelerated because you didn't know what to expect in terms of IEDs,
Yeah. And that's the problem when, I don't want, not to toot my own horn, but when you're good at clearing, you get the shitty missions to clear for.
Yeah.
So I was always the asshole that had to clear for night raids.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sitting there, I'm like, all right, here we go again. If there's any time there's going to be like the IEDs turned on, it's at night.
Yeah, for sure.
And it was always that, you're just laying in bed during the day. They're like, oh, go get some downtime for the night raid. And you're just laying there like, all right, well, this is it.
My favorite thing about clearing on night raids was using a device that had LEDs and sounds to mark positions and then being told to turn off.
Earplug that they gave you?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But you still had to turn the LEDs off at least, even if you use the sound. So doing something completely by sound without being able to do the most important thing about clearing, which is seeing the ground in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
Because the
that's
IED,
like our MATVs that had the backup noise when it backed up.
super stealthy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot about that. We would infill and then put it in reverse and make like announcing to everybody within a square mile of where we were at.
I mean, at that point, nobody's driving in with a Caterpillar diesel motor in their truck and they're like, oh, that's, Muhammad who lives up the street. Like, that's the Americans.
The Americans.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. Which, while we did all the walking, especially towards the end, God, am I walking from the cop,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another fear that I personally experienced was helplessness. When part of your formation is in a firefight, but you are stuck in a marijuana field or you're stuck in a parallel grape row and it's really kicking off and you can't do anything.
Yep.
There's nothing you can do. And I think it's important we highlight how these formations looked. We have 40, 50 people walking at 6 foot intervals between each other. Our formation would stretch 200-300 meters from start to finish.
Yeah.
So one portion of our element could be in a really nasty gunfight, but we could be just chilling behind a building or in a grape row or next to a tree. And you're like, well, they're in a fight up there, but I can't go help them because I don't have the ability to move off of this cleared path without a mine detector.
Yeah.
So
I ran into that issue in one of the firefights we got into, like the firefight where that Afghan dude got shot going through that wall, and so I had the 240, which this is a controversial opinion. Apparently, we found out on social media, but I think it's a piece of shit in Panjwai and had no business being fielded out there. But I was humping the 240 one of the few times I did, and they were they took contact from a grape hut. I hopped up on to the grape wall to try and get into the fight, but everybody was online at a wall shooting at the grape hut, and I was like, well, I can't shoot them all in the back, obviously. And I said, and I couldn't just run up there by a different route because it wasn't cleared, you know. So it really limited what you could do, and it made such a big experience. I mean, the guy up front got shot and killed, and me and Hud were back there just hanging out, waiting for it to simmer down, you know. So
Yeah, I mean, at Throat Chop, when we first ran into that initial burst of fire right outside of the town, I was in a marijuana field with Todd, and like there's bullets whizzing right by us, like, and we can't do anything.
Yep.
Because I have no idea where Tom and the Ford element is. I don't know if there's people, because you can only see 5-6 feet in front of your face in those fields.
mm-hmm.
And Phil, you were with us on Throat Chop, and no offense, but I always forget that you were, because you and Lloyd and Smothers and Kobos were you were the trail end of our element.
Yep.
And as I mentioned before, these elements are super long, so I didn't even see you until the end.
Yeah, so I mean, it was weird because you guys had advanced into pretty much like the next set of compounds at one point, and then the trail element came out of that same marijuana field, and we got in contact, and you guys were already gone. I think that was before you got shot in the backpack.
I got shot in the backpack before we got to the marijuana field.
Okay, so then it was after.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like through that whole firefight, you guys had moved on and we're just sitting and waiting, and then when we finally get to the end where like Dennison and Tom and everybody gets hit, Lloyd's radio battery had died. So we had no idea what was going on. We heard the initial explosion. Todd runs up. We thought we heard another one, but we couldn't tell. So you guys were all up front scrambling, trying to get everything done. And Lloyd, Kobos, and I are just sitting in the back past the A&A. Like we are the last three people. No idea what's going on. We're just kind of hanging out, waiting. Finally, the A&A start moving, and we're like, all right, well, I guess like we'll figure out what's going to happen. Yeah. And we came around that corner down into the creek, and then we came up, and that was it. And then we get back, and you guys had to fill us all in on everything.
Yeah, I mean, and it's, Luke's mentioned it before, and, the Panjwai was a fight of inches, and up for me, that was arguably one of the top 3 worst days of my life.
Yeah.
But for you, it still wasn't a great day because you knew that some of your buddies were hurt, but, it was a very different experience for you, just for no reason other than where you stood in the formation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for sure. And we talked about it a lot, but I think it's just drives it home because it was so close. I was watching a video today, and this guy was talking about how in Afghanistan all the contact is at like 750 meters, 1,000 meters. And I'm like, no, not for us. It wasn't.
Yeah. I don't think we had one engagement that was that far away.
No, man. I mean, everything was within 200 meters, I'd say. And the majority within 100, I would guess.
Well, and I know the 138 guys were super stoked when they brought their MGS, that big gun on top of the striker, and they're like, we're going to use this all the time. I'm like, I don't think you're going to get as much use out of it as you think you can, because you can still only shoot what you can see.
Yep.
Yeah.
And with everything being flat, you can only see to the next kalot or to the next, tree line, and even from the top of the hill, you can only see so far. Yeah, that was a big limiter for us. So why we couldn't really effectively use our snipers. It's why even if we had tanks, we couldn't have effectively used tanks. That's why that Gustav was so critical, because that gave us that capability to have a major weapon system like that in our element that didn't have to be on tracks. And Luke, you are quite the proponent of the Carl Gustav, so why don't you give us a little schooling on the greatest weapon system in Panjwai?
One of the things that the Goose did for us, man, is it completely changed how effective we could be at squishing fighting positions. Because we've talked a lot about, we would get hit from these grape huts, we would get hit from compounds. So these guys were behind 3-foot mud walls. And so for the uninitiated, sadly, you don't understand how beautiful this thing is. It's a 84 millimeter recoilless rifle, which is a fancy way of saying it's a bazooka. But it's not a bazooka in that there's only one way to shoot it, which is out and explodes. It comes with I can't remember how many different kinds of rounds.
Tons, like 5 or 6.
Tons of rounds, yeah.
Yeah.
That's just what we had.
This is what we had, yeah. They have these, the big ones for us that really made the difference was the airburst round. So you dial, you would get your range, let's say 150 meters. You dial it in on the round, slap it in the goose, dial it in on sight, shoot, and this thing would go out, up, and explode. So if they were, the first time I shot the Gustav, actually, they were shooting at us from one of the little hills, mounds. Why am I blanking? Cemetery things. What do we call those things? The shrines. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they were shooting us from those positions, which was pretty common because they were elevated and they can actually get a little bit of elevation on us. And so, they were shooting at us from one of those shrines, and there was mud walls and stuff, and we couldn't do nothing. Threw that airburst in, and it was the perfect shot. It landed right on top of that fighting position, and that did it. That until the next one, until the next firefight. But that pretty much ended it. But that was a game changer for us. And then another thing that really made a difference was the round that has a delayed impact. So, traditionally, like if you're using 40 mic or you're using like an AT4 or something, as soon as that round hits where it's going to explode. So it's good in that it's obviously going to mess somebody's world up if they're on the other side of a wall when an explosion goes off, but it's not going to kill them. It's not going to wound them. But the Gustav, you could set that delayed impact to round, and it would actually push through these mud walls. It pushed through the grape huts and explode on the other side. And then they had another one, which we rarely used, I think because it was so expensive. And
the heat round.
The heat round. Yeah. There's only so many of them, and those things were devastating. And they would essentially collapse a building. It would punch through the wall, and it would just send out this massive concussive ball of heat, and it would pull all the oxygen into this source of heat and crumble buildings. It was an intense weapon platform. And up until that point, pretty much the only people that had them were special operations guys, like Rangerback guys and SF. And I think we might have even got ours from SF. I think they somehow managed to gift them to us or let us sign them out or something. I can't. Maybe I'm wrong in that, but
that sounds right. Yeah,
Stefan would know, but fuck,
yeah,
Stefan disappeared on us.
Well, the beauty of the Goose too was it wasn't just, with the AT4, if you're carrying the AT4, that's one use and it's done. And then you're just carrying this empty tube on your back. The Goose, you could have an AG carrying 4 or 5 rounds, and that's so much more efficient than carrying just 1 or 2 AT4s and the laws that we had from Vietnam.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that we had to blow up 3 weeks into the deployment because they were all 4 of them fired.
Stuff. Yeah.
I can't remember which mission it was, but I remember Bally, he grabbed 4 of them. And they all misfired. He was so mad.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, so that was a couple days later. EOD took every one we had on the cop, drove them out into the desert, and blew them all up.
Yep,
that was a big explosion too.
It was a big explosion.
That was a good time.
But yeah, the Gustav. And the Gustav's light. It weighs 20 pounds unloaded. Mm-hmm. Actually, the AGs ended up carrying more weight than I did because it was awesome, man. 20 pounds? Are you kidding me? With just your kit and 20 pounds, I only had 85, 90 pounds of shit instead of 110 to carry around.
Yeah.
When I had the Goose. And then I cemented my position as the Gustav gunner whenever we got into that first contact, and I got that knocked him out of that shrine.
Yeah,
it's beautiful. It's such a good. Oh man, I just loved it because what's not fun about shooting something that explodes?
Well, yeah. Well, and I think the reason that, and I agree with you. I thought the 240 it's a great weapon. It works really well. It's definitely better than the SAW as far as the quality of the weapon and how well it works. Mm-hmm. But to use it in that environment, in addition to a SAW, didn't make any sense. It didn't bring anything new to the fight because you couldn't move that 240 up and back in the formation and really make a difference. But the Gustav, by having this really flexible 2-man team of a Gustav and AEG gunner and their light, it was an instant firefight ender. And you didn't have to get in the same kind of positions that you had to with a machine gun because we could shoot a Gustav over people's heads. We just had to let them know it was coming. There's no risk to it. So we could quickly get into position with that thing, and as soon as that thing went off anywhere near the Taliban, that firefight was over.
Yeah.
And that was not the case with a 240. We could spit the 240 at them all day, and they'd keep chasing us all the way down the grape row, shooting at us every 15 minutes. But if we launched an effective goose round at them, that took the fight out of them.
Yeah, for sure. And all you had to do is make sure there wasn't anybody in the back blast.
Yep.
Which we failed at a couple of times.
quite a few times.
Piper dislocated his shoulder, and Ebro got his noodle rocked pretty bad because it was at Haji Gul Muhammad, I think. No, it was the one before that, where we like essentially leapfrog compounds. And
Oh yeah.
yeah,
That was
so I
also Haji Gul Muhammad. It was just a different time.
oh, okay. So
Yeah.
I hopped up on the roof, and Ebro thought he was cool by like going downstairs and like sitting in this little nook behind the Ventura of the goose, and it rocked him. His noodle, man. He was
Yeah.
deaf for like 5 minutes.
Yeah. That was a fun firefight, man. Like, and
was.
there's not a whole lot. And Glenn, you were up on the roof with me, weren't you?
For part of it. So I started in the like that intersection. There was like the lowercase t intersection. So one end went into the compound, and there was the roads. And I don't even remember who was out there with me, but I had 2 saws out there with me, and I was just in charge of kind of keeping them going. And at one point, Dan Baker came out and was like, yeah, they're all up on the roof, but I don't want to go. And I was like, all right, cool, man. Like, you hang out here. I'm going to go shoot at stuff off the roof. And then I went up there and I was with you for the rest of it.
Yeah.
It was
That
just
was
one of
fun.
those few times that we got in early and we got there fast and we set into the compound and we had fire superiority before the firefight even started.
Right.
We were kind of just waiting for it to happen.
It was one of those rare moments where we were prepared and it wasn't like an ambush.
Well, when I think about how towards the end of the deployment, we really, like I said, well, the first thing we did was we started rolling as a full platoon, because at that point, a full platoon was like 12 people, you know. But we rolled as a full platoon, but we just kind of hit this groove where everybody was hitting their licks, and you know that firefight always stuck out to me because it went so well, even though one of the 138 guys almost got killed. So I actually remember he was in the prone, and and they opened up the firefight with the AK, and the round hit like right in front of that dude's chest. Like it must have just hit the wall just below where he was like kind of pushing himself up a little bit. And I was like, fuck, he's dead. You know, like these guys have been here for 3 days and somebody's already died. But fortunately, he wasn't. I remember after the firefight, I just remember like, hey, man, you all right? And he's like, yeah, I'm good. I was like, dude, it's like, I thought you were dead, man.
Well,
like,
welcome to Afghanistan.
Yeah, this is a good welcome for you. Curtis almost got decked that mission, too.
Yeah, it was almost the same kind of situation, too.
Yeah.
Glenn, you were up there with me when that happened, weren't you?
Yeah, we were all just sitting there. I mean, I remember hearing rounds flying right over our heads, and we're just like, yeah, whatever, who cares? At this point, it's the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I remember I was just standing up. Like, everyone else is, like, crouched or sitting behind the parapet, and I don't know why. I was just like, nah, I can see him better up here. So
Yeah,
I was
I
like,
think you were scoping for him, man.
probably. I don't know.
Yeah.
At that
Let's
point,
say-
I would compare it to like senioritis. You know, like you're almost done.
Yeah.
You just don't give a shit anymore.
I wanted to shoot at somebody, man. I'd already dumped like 2 mags. I was like, let's keep the fight going.
Yeah.
I have
for
that
sure.
that iconic picture walking back onto Spurwingar with like flipping them the double birds, and you can see how many 320 rounds I had dumped.
Yeah, your whole thing's empty.
Oh yeah, your bandolier.
Yeah. Well, I remember
Yeah,
I was just standing there, and it was the loudest sound that I ever heard in my life that was not an explosion.
Mm.
Because, the bullet passed inches from my ear. And like I just instinctually dropped. I was like,
Yep.
oh, nope. So fully standing up to fully on the ground.
Real quick.
Yeah.
Well,
and
I was sitting at the top of the stair, and you were only like maybe 5 or 6 feet away from me. So I heard the zoop, boom, and it whacked that wall, and you dropped, and I was like, holy shit! I was like, Curtis, you all right? He's like, yeah, I'm good, dude. I think I almost got shot. I was like, I think you almost did, man.
yeah, that was one of those
close.
few chances that I know that they had singled me out. They weren't shooting at the Americans. They were shooting at Curtis.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, your lucky home dig only had iron sights. Yeah, 'cause they were they were probably 100, 120 meters out.
I
during
don't
that
know,
firefight. At least the ones that were hitting us from the north. The guys from the south were pretty close. They were only like 20, 30 meters away.
Yeah, they were pretty close.
Yeah,
Other than that, it was good fun.
Yeah.
it was.
Yeah.
I got to shoot the Gustav twice in that firefight. It was really fun.
Well, and we would be remiss not to mention how you shot it the last time, where you had no ear protection. So you found that grape hut and you stuck a finger in your ear and fired that thing one-handed. And then what did you say after you fired the round?
If my memory serves, I've turned to Curtis and I went, America.
That is precisely what was said. And
Even though-
there's no exaggerating in this story. That is 100% exactly how it went down. And
that's
that
wonderful.
proves that it's a recoilless rifle because
I didn't. Yeah, it's just like
just
it's like shooting a
one-handed.
paintball gun.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like
and
shooting a paintball gun.
I mean, the thing is huge. I mean, the tip of the round, we'll use Baby Yoda here as an example.
Nice.
It's like twice as big as this thing.
Yeah.
It's 84 millimeters. You know.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah.
Gorgo, by the way, or Grogo. Sorry.
Grogu. Yeah,
Grogu.
spoiler alert
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
for
spoiler
those who
alert.
haven't watched it. Yeah.
Sorry.
But
Oh, is that season 2?
Uh-oh. Yeah.
Wow. Thanks, guys.
Sorry, buddy.
sorry, dude.
Sorry, I was using my ex-girlfriend's Disney Plus, and she must have found out and kicked me off of it. So
That's tragic. Hit me up after. I got you. I'll make it up to you.
Well, so I think one of the things that is shooting the Gustav actually makes me think of it, and I think it's a good note to end this podcast on, because we've talked a lot and we've had some heavy episodes so far. And this one, we talked about the fear and stuff. And last night we really got kind of heavy, more than we did on this recording, which I'm kind of glad for, because I can only do so much of that. But one of the things we need to address too, is just sometimes, man, it's fun. It's just like doing any other kind of drug. Like you get that high in like combat when it's going good and you're hitting that lick and and especially when you're sitting still and you ain't having to hump gear, it can be fun. It can be fun in that it's this crazy experience that completely just warps your entire body with adrenaline. And when you're shooting an 84 millimeter Gustav at a great putt and you see that thing explode on the other side of that wall, it's a satisfying feeling. So what are some fun moments for you guys that you remember?
This is all you, Phil.
And maybe I'm crazy. Maybe that's the problem.
I mean, Haji Gul Muhammad, that last mission was probably my favorite, because that was just an adrenaline rush. It was fun. We had the upper hand from the initial start. A lot of mine was just like the shenanigans on the cop. Like we had a lot of. I remember pouring chem light all over golf balls, and you would just hit them with a baseball bat out over like southern Afghanistan. Just fun stuff like that, sitting out at like the smoke pit that someone had made a rocking chair in. Just
Platoon,
like the camaraderie
Platoon sport
moments.
days.
Yeah.
Ultimate Frisbee that broke ankles and
Oh my god, that was a terrible idea.
so
Yeah.
bad.
Ultimate
Terrible idea.
Ultimate Frisbee on a LZ with gravel is bigger than your fist.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, you had to have fun, and even you had to have fun on patrols too. You had to mess around, joke around. I mean, obviously when stuff got serious, we buckled down and got serious. But sometimes combat was fun if it wasn't a bad firefight. You had to have a good time, and we made the most of it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if I had to pick the most fun moment of the deployment, I'd probably have to point to Haji Gul Muhammad too, just because it was so controlled. It was a firefight where you got to have fun. You never really, other than that one moment, never really felt like you were in imminent danger.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think when else might have just been fun.
When you guys had to fill in that pothole with concrete.
That is the
Have fun
opposite.
for that?
That is the complete opposite of the word fun.
That one was fun for me. I just got to sit in the truck.
Oh my god,
dude.
that was so stupid. Oh.
So, all right, we'll go ahead and tell this story because it's appropriate.
Yeah, it is.
So, I think it was 3rd Platoon hit an IED with their truck, and not a big one, like a little guy. I think it maybe ripped their tire off. So, like, it was clearly an IED meant for like a motorcycle or whatever. It wasn't meant for an MATV. So, we go out to do the blast damage assessment, a BDA. And it's a paved road, and there's a big hole in the asphalt, and there's a decent sized hole in the dirt under it. And we're like, well, that sucks. We'll have to, it's going to have to get fixed. But, in our minds, we're like, well, we have combat engineers, and we have like literal MOSs that do this. And I don't know, I know it was way above Sperwengar level that said, no, fix it now. Pour concrete in the hole and fix it. We're like, we don't have concrete. We don't carry concrete around. They're like, don't worry. We're going to send 2nd Platoon to Zangabad, and they're going to load up with concrete, and you're going to bring it there. So they brought us concrete in bags, dry concrete, and nothing to mix it with. No buckets, no wheelbarrow, no nothing. Just dry concrete. We're like, what do you want us to do with this? Make concrete. In what? What are we supposed to make it in? And like this went up and back the chain of command like 6 times. And finally, like the final word was pour that fucking concrete in the hole, pour water in the hole, mix it in the hole.
Yep.
And it's important to note where we were.
Oh my god.
We were
Yeah,
in
fucking
Najat.
Yeah.
We were on the paved road on the east end of Najat. Like we could see tree lines, we could see places we'd been shot at from. We're wide open and exposed. We have like 17 guys or however many we had out on the ground, like doing manual labor. So like pulling water out of a creek, mixing concrete in a hole, breaking open concrete bags, pouring them in a hole.
110 degrees.
110
In full
degrees
kit.
outside. In full kit. But none of us are carrying weapons because our hands are full doing this. We got all of our rifles stacked up along the side of an MATV. Like the gunners and the MATVs are on guard, and there's like 1 or 2 people managing, carrying their rifles. But other than that, we're all defenseless in the most dangerous part of our AO, filling a hole in the ground improperly with the wrong tools for the job. Because some general somewhere along chain of command said, I want that hole fucking fixed, and I can't afford to wait for combat engineers. And what happened that night? The Afghans got a tractor out there, they ripped it up, and then a week later the combat engineers fixed it.
Yeah. Yeah, that just speaks to the disconnect, man. There's such a disconnect from like the lived-in, on-the-ground experience. Because we all knew it was fucking stupid, and we all knew it was a waste of time, and we all knew that I can't believe we didn't get hit doing that. Like it still blows my mind. Yeah, I think the only reason we didn't is because we had 4 or 5 trucks that were like right around us. And they usually didn't fuck with us in the truck too much. And then Jot did though. They hit the trucks all the time.
Yeah, that's where Burl took a freaking bullet to his
dome.
Yeah, to his helmet. We should clarify.
Yes.
He's healthy and alive.
He's alive and he's okay, but a little rattled. Understandably.
Yeah, that same firefight, I almost got shot taking a piss off the side of the truck.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Which, Glenn, you almost got shot taking a piss one time, didn't you?
Was I was behind the tree, so I think that was our first time in Najat, which I think we might have talked about this a little bit back and forth on Facebook. That was when Xanadine was his name, the ALP or the ANP commander in our AO.
That sounds familiar.
That's his name. That's when we were on QRF. We got the word that he got shot, so we rolled out and we walked into Najat, and I think that was the first time we'd ever been there. And there was one point where there was a grape row. I think it was to the west of us because we were walking south. I think it was to the west. Just lit us up. And there's like 2 sections of wall and a tree. And everyone just went whoo, behind the 2 walls and didn't leave me enough room. So I just laid down behind this tree. And we got back to the base and they were basically like, yeah, no, man. That tree was getting ripped to shreds. And you're like, cool, great. Thanks.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Appreciate you guys.
Were you actively pissing whenever they started shooting at you?
No, I was just, we were just walking along. Like, we were still in our file, moving along, and all of a sudden opened up the PKM, and everyone just...
Oh, I thought you got shot at while you were pissing. That's the story I heard.
No, who was it? Somebody, Hewlett and Nagurn, when we did the blocking position.
Oh yeah, that's what it was. Yeah.
I can't remember which one of them it was. One of them went around the corner of the building, was pissing, and got shot at.
Yeah.
And then the next time we went out there, he was like, hey, come look at where I got shot at yesterday, and got shot at again from the same exact place. And I just remember Nitz being like, just don't go over there anymore.
Yeah. I almost, there's a great picture of you, which obviously we can't put on Instagram, but it's so good. It's
that's
if you
the
take
same,
the fabled combat
mission.
dump. Oh, is it? Okay,
yeah, so there was 2 or 3 of the buildings in the compound, so they were on one end getting shot at, and I was over here taking a shit.
Well, we have photographic evidence of the act.
Minding my own business with my pants down, just taking a dump.
It's so good. There's such a good picture, man.
It's a very infantry photograph.
It is. They should just show that to people who, whenever they sign the line, okay, here's what your job looks like.
All right. Oh, 11 Bravo. Here you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Yep. So Phil, you got out pretty. I'm calling you Phil, and I apologize. His name is Glenn. His last name is Phillips. We just always called him Phil, so I apologize. You got out like 6 months after we came home.
Yep. So we came home, December
7th, I think.
Yeah.
12th. I think we left Afghanistan on the 7th, got home on the 12th or something like that.
So I went on terminal leave in July of 2013, which was 7 months pretty much to the day after we got back.
Yeah.
I joined the National Guard actually after, it was probably, I would say a couple weeks to a month and a half after we got back. That's when everything with ISIS started to happen, and I started getting letters from the DoD that was basically like, hey, you haven't, got in contact with your inactive reserve component unit, which was the 72nd Legal Affairs Battalion.
Ooh.
So I was like, you know what, man? If we're going to have to go fight ISIS, I'm not doing it with a bunch of JAG officers. Like, I don't even know what I would do.
Right.
So I went and signed up with the local, National Guard infantry unit, which was the 2nd Battalion, 108th Infantry Regiment.
And how was that?
It was different. So you show up feeling like the new guy, but you're also one of 5 dudes that's been in an actual combat situation, and the other 4 have come from active duty too. So it's this weird mix of I'm the new guy, but I also know more than you almost. Same culture though, a lot of the dudes have full-time jobs, but they still have that same dark infantry humor mindset, kind of oh, I'll kiss you on the mouth right now if you want. And it's like, all right, man, cool.
Right.
But I did 2 years in the National Guard and I got out. It just wasn't doing it for me. And I pretty much just did it as a transition period. So I found people with the same mindset who lived locally to me versus just getting out and basically going cold turkey.
Right. And so what are you doing these days?
So I am in my 2nd year of my master's in social work program, which puts me on a fast track to be a licensed social worker, hopefully within the VA system. So right now I'm an intern on their inpatient behavioral health unit. So I deal with anyone who has thoughts of suicide, any addiction they want help with getting recovery for, severe mental illness, any PTSD. Really anyone who just feels like they're having too hard of a time for them to deal with on their own, they can come up and stay. We only have 15 beds. And I mean, it's a locked unit. So you're coming in, you're not leaving until your psychiatrist says you can leave.
Sure.
But it's really just to get you set up with programs that will help you and get you back on the path that you need to be successful in life.
Cool. Yeah.
I mean, you must have some pretty interesting insights given your background and then working with particularly veterans in that kind of space. I mean, is there anything that kind of stands out to you that you've experienced since you got back and you started working in that sector?
It almost, I was a certain part of my thought process was it'll make it easier. But really it makes it harder. It makes it harder because you have to a certain extent, you have to show you care and express your empathy, but you have to pull yourself back from feeling like you are one of them.
Yeah.
So I can't go in and be like, look, dude, I'll do anything you need to get you better, because the VA has, certain resources and programs, and there's red tape. It's a federal entity. So it's, hey, man, here are the things I can offer you. And they're like, well, I don't want any of those. And you have to be able to be like, look, man, this is what we can offer you. You can take it, or I can help you find something else. Right. So I think it's hard not being able to do as much as you want to.
Do you think you'll stay with the VA whenever you're done?
If you'd asked me a month ago, I would have said yes. I've seen enough kind of intricacies of some things that it's kind of been a reminder that these people are not veterans, so they don't necessarily get it in the same way that a veteran would.
Sure.
I've had a few disagreements with the treatment team that I work with just because of how they perceive a veteran's actions versus how I do.
Yeah.
So I don't know. The VA is a great place to be for social workers. They are the #1 employer of social workers in the United States, but
take a second and process that.
Yeah.
The Department of Veteran Affairs is the #1 employer for social workers in America. I mean, there's a lot of vets, don't get me wrong, but
not that many.
There's not that many. So
Yeah.
for such a small percentage of the population to need that kind of help, um, that's a hell of a statement there, man.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the truth. It's never there's technically separate like diagnoses of PTSD. So you can have PTSD uncomplicated, you can have complicated PTSD. Pretty much all combat PTSD is complicated. You never just have PTSD.
Yeah.
There's always something more with it. So like I pull out my old medical records. I didn't understand how any of it worked back then, but like there's 5 or 6 mental health diagnoses on there. So you're like, oh, all right.
Well, I think that's a big weakness within the VA system right now is they're very single-minded and they drift between what their focus is. So, when they see PTSD symptoms on a person, they tend to ignore other things like TBI. Like, well, the symptoms are too similar, so we're just going to go with the one that makes the most sense. When it's not just one thing.
Yeah.
We were talking yesterday about the line charges and all the explosions that we endured. Anybody has an issue from our deployment should be able to attribute it to a TBI. Just people got blown up. People were 5 feet away from line charges. There were IEDs that went off that under people's feet were next to driving in trucks. I mean, it's firing the Gustav. I mean, you're not supposed to fire the Gustav more than a few times because of a risk of TBI. So this was constant.
Yep.
So to simply blank like, well, they saw combat, so it must be PTSD, and it's not a TBI. It's so I'm glad you pointed that out because I've observed that too.
And I mean, it's important to remember too. The VA is a federal organization, so as administrations change, so does the mission of the VA, depending on what they want to focus on.
Yeah, right. And it's federal, so everything's gonna move slow. Yeah, no change is gonna happen quick, so it's all gonna be super gradual. I mean, even the conversation about PTSD has changed so much in the past. Well, basically since we were in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Because I feel like inside the Army, but outside of the Army and stuff like that, 10 years ago, if you had PTSD, you were like the guy that was like collapsed in the corner, like, oh my God, I can't function and be a member of society,
Right.
And that's what the media, which I have a big beef with how the media portrays PTSD and veterans and stuff like that. But but now it's like it's slowly people are beginning to kind of understand that it's more complicated than that, and it's varying in degrees, and different guys have different issues with different things, and it's not the classic, there's the show The Punisher on Netflix. I hated how they showed the veterans in that show. It made me so mad because like of course the guy was crazy and he wanted to like blow himself up or whatever, and he couldn't hack it. And I hate that portrayal because it's more complicated than that. Yeah. It's not that simple. Maybe that's what it looks like for some guys, but it's not what it is for everybody.
Well, that's the way it's the most cinematic too. That's
yeah, exactly.
That awe factor.
Yeah, exactly.
So what's next for you, Phil?
Well, I've got one more semester of school, and then it's who knows from there. I have to take a state licensing exam. And then it's job hunting.
Fun.
Yeah.
I'm in the same position.
Love it.
Yeah.
Now's a great time to enter the job market, especially if you're trying to get a job working from home, by the way.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Phil, we're about to wrap this thing up. So what we'd like to do is give you an opportunity to say whatever the fuck you want. Anything that you didn't get a chance to say that maybe we skipped over that we plan to talk about, anybody you'd like to say something to within, reason and whatever. But this is kind of like your chance. I mean, the floor is yours, man.
You know what? I think I'll keep it simple. So what you guys are doing is something that I don't know if you realize the impact it will actually have. There's a lot of guys out there who don't get to tell their story. And just being able to sit down and tell your story is so beneficial for people. So I'm just going to say thank you.
Oh, thanks, man. We appreciate that.
I think you're going to find that it helps a lot of people.
I didn't anticipate the volume of impact that it's already. People are reaching out and reconnecting and stuff, and it's been pretty cool, man. So we
Yeah.
appreciate that.
And
Appreciate the
we
vote of confidence.
Yeah, exactly. We appreciate the vote of confidence. We appreciate you being willing to jump on so early. I mean, you haven't even seen an episode other than episode 1, so you don't even really know where, but you trust us. We appreciate that.
course.
And we didn't mention it before, but you're our very first remote guest. So thanks for being the guinea pig for the podcast in a box.
Yeah. Hey, it worked great, guys.
Awesome.
Cool.
All right, man. Thanks so
All right,
much.
guys.
Cheers.